She stood in the vast marble lobby every morning as if she were part of the architecture, still and unnoticed, a quiet figure swallowed by glass walls and polished floors that reflected everyone except her. People streamed past in tailored suits, their footsteps confident, their conversations sharp with numbers and power, never slowing as their eyes skimmed over her presence like it had no value. Some mistook her for lost help, others for a beggar who had wandered in from the street, and a few did not see her at all. Security guards watched her with suspicion, hands hovering near their radios, while greeting executives by name with easy smiles. Once, a young assistant wrinkled her nose and muttered that the company should tighten its entrance policy, as if dignity itself required a dress code. She absorbed it all in silence, not shrinking, not reacting, simply observing, the way she had learned to do long ago when reacting brought nothing but pain. Her coat was plain, her shoes worn, her hair pulled back without style, and that simplicity made people comfortable dismissing her. They talked freely around her, revealing frustrations, ambitions, betrayals whispered too loudly, believing she was invisible. She learned who feared whom, who lied smoothly, who trembled when certain names were spoken. The lobby became her classroom, and ignorance became the mask that allowed her to learn everything. Sometimes a coin clinked into the paper cup she kept by her side, not for charity but as a shield, a symbol that encouraged others to underestimate her further. Each sound of metal was a reminder of how quickly humans judged worth. She remembered another time, years ago, when she had stood beside an old man everyone else had dismissed as weak and irrelevant. He had noticed her silence, her patience, the way her eyes listened harder than her ears. While others competed for his attention, she brought him tea, read documents aloud when his eyesight failed, and asked questions no one else thought to ask. He taught her about markets, about ownership, about the difference between noise and control, explaining that real power rarely announced itself. In his dim apartment, surrounded by stacks of files and quiet ticking clocks, she learned how companies were built, broken, and reborn. When he died, the world barely paused, but before that final breath he placed his trust where no one expected it. Now, standing in the lobby of the company that bore his life's work, she felt the weight of that trust pressing against her chest. At night, she returned to a small rented room, folding her coat carefully, taking out a thick envelope hidden beneath loose floorboards, checking its contents as if they might vanish. Legal papers sealed and signed, confirming a truth too large for her reflection. She replayed the insults of the day not with bitterness, but with focus, reminding herself why timing mattered. Power revealed too early was power attacked. She watched the executives arrive late and leave earlier, watched deals collapse in tense phone calls, watched confidence crack behind glass offices. The company was sick, though it pretended to be strong, bleeding value through arrogance and careless decisions. She could feel it, like a slow tremor under her feet. One afternoon, as laughter echoed near the elevators, a senior manager pointed at her cup and joked loudly that ambition must have fallen on hard times. Others laughed, relieved to be cruel together. She lowered her eyes, letting them believe what they wanted, while memorizing his face, his tone, the way fear flickered behind his confidence. Ignorance protected her better than any guard ever could. Days passed, then weeks, each one tightening the knot of anticipation inside her. She was not waiting for courage, because she had lived without comfort long enough to understand fear. She was waiting for alignment, for the moment when truth would not just be shocking but unavoidable. As she stood there, ignored yet present, she felt the strange calm of someone holding the final card in a game no one else realized they were playing. The building breathed around her, unaware that its future stood quietly at the entrance, underestimated, patient, and already in control. The morning the tension finally snapped began with urgency buzzing through the building like a live wire, phones ringing too often, voices rising too quickly, and the usual confidence of the executives fraying under the pressure of bad news that refused to stay contained. Screens in the lobby flashed red numbers that no one wanted to explain out loud, and whispers of a major investor pulling out spread faster than official memos. She felt the shift before anyone spoke to her, the way a storm announces itself in the air long before rain falls. For the first time, she did not take her usual seat by the wall. She stood, straightened her coat, and walked toward the reception desk with a calm that felt almost unnatural given the chaos around her. The receptionist barely glanced up at first, already exhausted, already prepared to dismiss another inconvenience, but something in her voice, steady, unhurried, made the woman pause. She asked for access to the executive floor, not as a request but as a statement of intent. Laughter rippled nearby, sharp and mocking, as a department head scoffed and asked if security was letting just anyone wander in now. A guard stepped closer, irritation on his face, ready to escort her out as he had threatened so many times before. She did not argue. She opened her bag and placed a heavy folder on the counter, the sound of it landing cutting cleanly through the noise. Inside were documents layered with seals, signatures, and dates that stretched back decades. The receptionist flipped a page, then another, her expression changing from annoyance to confusion, then to disbelief. She picked up the phone with trembling fingers, whispering a name that had not been spoken lightly in years. Conversations stalled. A few people leaned closer, curiosity replacing contempt. When the elevator doors opened moments later, summoned by a call no one dared ignore, the laughter had vanished completely. She stepped inside alone, the doors closing on a lobby suddenly too quiet, faces frozen in expressions that would soon haunt them. Upstairs, the executive floor smelled of polished wood and expensive fear. A heated argument stopped mid-sentence as she entered the boardroom, rainwater dripping softly from her coat onto the flawless floor. Someone demanded to know who she was and why she was there, voice loud but unsteady. She introduced herself simply, without titles, without apology, then took a seat that no one offered. Before objections could form, she asked for the latest financial reports, naming specific pages and clauses as if she had reviewed them already. A man laughed nervously and tried to correct her, only to falter when she finished his sentence with the exact figure he had hoped no one would question. She spoke about liabilities hidden in optimistic forecasts, about contracts renewed without understanding their long-term cost, about promises made to partners who were now preparing lawsuits instead of celebrations. The room shifted as confidence drained from faces one by one. Attempts to interrupt her failed, because every word she spoke was anchored in evidence. When she finally revealed the will, the transfer of ownership, and the conditions that had activated that very morning, disbelief swept the room like a wave. Some stared at the documents as if they might dissolve under their gaze. Others leaned back, calculating exits, alliances, excuses. One executive accused her of manipulation, another of deception, but their voices lacked force. She reminded them calmly that ownership was not a matter of opinion, and that legality did not require their approval. Silence followed, thick and suffocating. She broke it by outlining immediate steps to stabilize the company, assigning responsibilities with a precision that left no room for argument. Departments would be audited, partnerships reviewed, leadership restructured. Those who resisted would be replaced. She did not raise her voice once. Strangely, that frightened them more than anger ever could. The crisis did not vanish, but it bent, reshaped by clarity and control. As the meeting ended, no one rushed to leave. They watched her, waiting as if movement required permission now. She stood, gathered her folder, and looked around the room with a quiet understanding of what had changed. The building had not recognized her when she entered that morning, but it would never forget her now. By the time evening settled over the city, the building felt different, as if its walls had absorbed the shock of the day and were slowly rearranging themselves around a new center of gravity. The frantic energy that had once defined the executive floors softened into something quieter but heavier, a recognition that authority had shifted in a way no one could undo. She moved through the corridors without entourage or announcement, the same steady pace she had always kept, though now doors opened before she reached them and conversations stopped when she passed. Faces that once carried casual contempt now wore careful politeness, and apologies hovered unspoken in the air. She noticed everything, not with satisfaction but with memory, because she remembered how easily respect could vanish when circumstances changed. At the security desk, she paused to thank the guard who had never raised his voice at her, who had once offered a cup of coffee on a cold morning when no one else had noticed the weather. His surprise was genuine, and his gratitude quiet. In the lobby, she stopped beside the reception desk, placing a small note of praise into the system for the woman who had taken the risk to look beyond assumptions earlier that day. These were not gestures of revenge or triumph, but corrections, small adjustments toward the kind of company she intended to build. Upstairs, messages flooded in from partners revising their demands, from investors recalibrating their language, from media outlets eager to frame her as a symbol rather than a person. She ignored most of it. Power, she had learned, did not require constant explanation. In the following days, change moved swiftly. Departments that drained resources without accountability were dismantled, while quiet teams that had delivered results without recognition were elevated. She walked factory floors and open offices alike, listening more than speaking, inviting honesty with the same patience she had practiced while being ignored. People were cautious at first, uncertain whether her silence signaled judgment, but gradually they understood it as attention. Trust grew not from speeches but from consistency. When an executive attempted to flatter her by rewriting history, claiming early belief in her potential, she let the lie pass without correction and later reassigned him to a role where results mattered more than stories. Another resigned before being asked, unable to adapt to a world where intimidation no longer worked. Late one night, alone in the boardroom, she opened the battered notebook she had carried for years, flipping through pages filled with observations made in the lobby when no one thought she mattered. Names, dates, patterns, lessons learned the hard way. She smiled once, softly, and closed it, understanding that the chapter it belonged to had ended. Standing by the window, she looked out over the city lights, remembering the small room where she had checked legal papers by lamplight, wondering if courage would fail her when the moment came. It had not. She thought of the old man who had trusted her, who had seen strength where others saw nothing, and she felt the weight of responsibility settle into something steady and familiar. The next morning, she entered the building through the same doors, but the lobby no longer swallowed her. It reflected her clearly now, not because she had changed her appearance, but because the truth had surfaced. People greeted her, some sincerely, others out of necessity, and she acknowledged them with the same calm courtesy she had always shown. She took her place not as a conqueror, but as a guardian of something fragile and powerful. Being ignored had taught her patience, humility, and the value of listening. Being underestimated had sharpened her judgment and stripped away any need for approval. As the new owner of a billion-dollar company, she understood that the greatest transformation had not been the shock she delivered to others, but the quiet certainty she carried within herself. And long after the story spread beyond those walls, becoming a lesson repeated in headlines and whispers alike, the building would remember the day its future walked in unnoticed and left forever changed.